The first shot that rang out through Willow Creek caught Penelope Aston by surprise, causing her to drop the basket of eggs she'd collected from the general store. It wasn't the gunshot that had startled her so much; those were common enough in a frontier town in 1879 Colorado, but rather the fact that it coincided with the very moment she'd felt the baby move inside her for the first time. Penelope's hand flew to her still small belly, hidden beneath the loose folds of her dress. 5 months along now, and every day a reminder of the man who had abandoned her. Charles Pembroke had promised her the world, a proper wedding in Denver, a house with a garden, then disappeared with the first winter snow after she told him about the baby, leaving nothing but a hastily scrawled note saying he wasn't ready for family life. "Miss Aston, are you all right?" The voice belonged to Mrs. Fletcher, the mayor's wife, who eyed Penelope's midsection with poorly disguised disapproval before bending to help gather the broken eggs. "I'm fine, thank you," Penelope replied, keeping her voice steady. Just startled by the commotion. Down the dusty main street, a crowd had gathered outside the saloon. Through the parting bodies, Penelope caught sight of a tall figure kneeling beside a wounded man. Even from a distance, she could make out the stranger's broad shoulders, the worn leather vest, and the confident way he moved as he pressed a handkerchief to the bleeding man's shoulder. "That'll be the new ranch hand from the Yates spread," Mrs. Fletcher whispered, following Penelope's gaze. "Cooper Yates himself, nephew to old Henry Yates. Arrived last week from Texas, they say. Trouble seems to follow him." Penelope nodded absently, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she felt standing in the street. In the 5 months since Charles had left, she'd managed to keep her pregnancy hidden from most of the town, wearing looser dresses and avoiding social gatherings. She taught at the schoolhouse on the edge of town, and most days managed to avoid the worst of the gossip. But it wouldn't be long before everyone knew her shame. "Thank you for your help, Mrs. Fletcher," Penelope said, gathering what remained of her purchases. "I should be getting back to the schoolhouse." "Of course, dear," Mrs. Fletcher said, her eyes softening slightly. "Will you be at church on Sunday?" Penelope hesitated. "I'm not feeling very well these days. Please give Reverend Miller my regrets." As she turned to leave, another commotion erupted from the saloon. This time, a man came stumbling out, blood streaming from his nose, followed by the tall stranger Cooper Yates flexing his right hand. "And don't you ever disrespect a lady in my presence again." Cooper's voice carried down the street, deep and commanding. Despite herself, Penelope paused, watching as the bloodied man scrambled away. Cooper turned, and for a brief moment their eyes met across the distance. He tipped his hat slightly, a gesture so small she might have imagined it, before turning back to the saloon. Penelope hurried away, one hand still protecting her belly, her heart racing in a way that had nothing to do with fear. The schoolhouse sat at the far end of town, a simple one-room building that served as both classroom and Penelope's living quarters. A small room had been built onto the back, providing her with a modest bedroom and privacy she desperately needed. As she approached, she noticed a group of children playing in the yard, though school had ended hours ago. "Miss Aston!" young Emma Miller called out, running toward her. "We're practicing for the Independence Day celebration. Will you help us with our song?" Penelope smiled, setting down her parcels. "Of course, Emma. Let me put these things away first." Inside the schoolhouse, Penelope leaned against the closed door and took a deep breath. She had 6 weeks left before the summer break, 6 weeks before she would have to leave Willow Creek. She had already written to her cousin in California, asking if she might stay with her until after the baby came. What would happen after that, she didn't know. The following morning dawned bright and clear. Penelope had just finished writing the day's arithmetic problems on the blackboard when she heard horses outside. Looking through the window, she was surprised to see Cooper Yates dismounting from a magnificent chestnut stallion. Behind him, a young boy of about 10 slid off a smaller pony. Penelope smoothed her dress and went to the door as Cooper approached, hat in hand. Up close, he was even more striking, tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. "Miss Aston?" he asked, his voice gentler than she'd heard in town the day before. "Yes, Mr. Yates. What can I do for you?" Cooper gestured toward the boy who hung back, kicking at the dirt. "This here's Peter, my brother's boy. He's come to live with me at the ranch, and he needs schooling." The boy looked up, his expression a mixture of defiance and uncertainty. Penelope recognized the look she'd seen it in many children who'd lost their parents. "Of course," she said, smiling at Peter. "We'd be happy to have him. Classes begin at 8 and end at 3, except Fridays when we finish at noon." Cooper nodded. "Much obliged, madam. His ma passed last winter, and my brother, well, he ain't been the same since. Thought a change of scenery might do the boy good." Penelope's heart softened. "I understand, Mr. Yates. Loss is difficult for anyone, especially children. Call me Cooper, please." He looked at her directly, his gaze honest and open. "And I want to apologize for the disturbance in town yesterday. Not the best introduction to Willow Creek." "You were defending someone's honor, from what I heard," Penelope replied. A slight smile touched Cooper's lips. "Just doing what's right, Miss Aston." "Penelope," she corrected, surprised at her own boldness. "Penelope," he repeated, and she liked the way her name sounded in his deep voice. "Peter will be here bright and early tomorrow." As they turned to leave, Penelope called after them. "Mr. Yates, Cooper will Peter need any supplies? Books or slates?" Cooper turned back. "Whatever he needs, I'll provide. Just let me know." She watched them ride away, Cooper's back straight in the saddle, Peter mimicking his posture. Something about the scene there matched profiles against the blue sky. The gentleness with which Cooper had spoken of his nephew made Penelope's throat tighten with emotion. Later that afternoon, as her students filed out after the final bell, Penelope sat at her desk, one hand absently rubbing her belly. The baby moved again, a gentle flutter like butterfly wings. In that moment, a sense of profound loneliness washed over her. This child would never know its father, would bear the stigma of illegitimacy, and might grow up watching Penelope struggle to provide for them both. She was so lost in thought that she didn't hear the approaching footsteps until a shadow fell across her desk. Looking up, she was startled to find Cooper Yates standing in the doorway, hat in hand once again. "I didn't mean to startle you," he said. "I was in town picking up supplies and thought I'd drop off Peter's things for tomorrow." He placed a package wrapped in brown paper on her desk. "That's very thoughtful," Penelope said, standing too quickly. A wave of dizziness swept over her, and she swayed slightly. Cooper was at her side in an instant, his hand steady under her elbow. "Are you all right, Miss Aston?" "Penelope," she reminded him, trying to smile through her embarrassment. "And yes, just a little lightheaded. I haven't eaten since breakfast." Cooper frowned. "That won't do. May I walk you home?" "I live here," she explained, gesturing to the back room. "The school board provides housing for the teacher." "Then may I bring you something to eat?" His concern seemed genuine, his eyes searching her face. "There's a basket of provisions in my saddlebag. Nothing fancy, but better than going hungry." Before she could protest, Cooper was gone, returning moments later with a cloth-covered basket. "Mrs. Simmons at the boarding house packed this for me. There's enough for two." Penelope hesitated. Being alone with a man, even for an innocent meal, could damage what remained of her reputation, but hunger won out over propriety, and she nodded. "That's very kind, thank you." Cooper laid out a simple meal of cold chicken, biscuits, and apple preserves on her desk. As they ate, he told her about the Yates Ranch, 500 acres of good grazing land 10 miles outside town, left to him by his uncle who had passed away earlier that year. "I never thought I'd settle in one place," Cooper admitted. Spent most of my life driving cattle from Texas to Kansas, sleeping under the stars. But when Uncle Henry left me the ranch, he shrugged. Seemed like maybe it was time to put down roots. And now you have Peter to think about, Penelope observed. Cooper nodded, his expression softening. Boys had it rough. His ma was my brother's whole world. When she took sick, he trailed off, then squared his shoulders. But we'll make it work. Ranch is a good place for a boy to grow up. You're doing a good thing, taking him in, Penelope said softly. Cooper's eyes met hers across the desk. Family's family. You do what needs doing. He paused, studying her face. What about you, Penelope? Any family nearby? She shook her head. My parents died in a typhoid outbreak 5 years ago. I have a cousin in Sacramento, but we've only corresponded by letter. It's a hard country for someone alone, Cooper said, his voice gentle. Something in his tone made Penelope want to confess everything about Charles, about the baby, about her plans to leave town in disgrace. But she held her tongue. Cooper Yates was the first person in months who had looked at her without judgment or speculation, and she couldn't bear to see that change. I manage, she said simply. Over the next few weeks, Peter became a regular student in Penelope's classroom. Though quiet at first, he gradually opened up, revealing a quick mind and a talent for drawing. Cooper often came to collect him after school, sometimes lingering to help Penelope with small repairs around the schoolhouse, fixing a loose floorboard, rehinging a shutter that had come loose in a storm. Each time, he brought something for her: fresh eggs from his hens, a jar of honey from a wild hive his ranch hands had found, once even a book of poetry he'd picked up from a traveling peddler. Thought you might enjoy this, he'd said gruffly, clearly embarrassed by the gesture. Penelope knew she was treading dangerous ground. Her condition was becoming harder to hide, and the whispers in town were growing louder. Mrs. Fletcher had cornered her after church, which Penelope had finally attended at Cooper's gentle urging, asking pointedly about her health and suggesting she might want to visit relatives before her condition became obvious. Yet she couldn't bring herself to pull away from Cooper's friendship. There was something steadying about his presence, something that made her feel less adrift in a world that seemed determined to cast her aside. One Friday afternoon in late June, as thunderclouds gathered on the horizon, Cooper arrived early to collect Peter. "Storm's coming," he explained, glancing at the darkening sky. "Thought we'd best get back to the ranch before it hits." He hesitated, then added, "Would you like a ride back to town, Penelope? Don't much like the idea of you walking in this weather." Before she could answer, the first fat raindrops began to fall, quickly turning into a downpour. Lightning cracked across the sky, followed by a boom of thunder that rattled the schoolhouse windows. "Looks like none of us is going anywhere for a while," Cooper said, helping Penelope close the shutters against the driving rain. As the storm raged outside, Penelope lit oil lamps and set water to boil for tea. Peter, excited by the unexpected adventure, pulled out a deck of cards and challenged Cooper to a game of rummy. The three of them sat at one of the student desks, playing cards and drinking tea as rain drummed against the roof. "Your move, Penny," Peter said, using the nickname he'd given her. Penelope studied her cards, aware of Cooper watching her. In the warm lamplight, with the storm creating a cocoon around them, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in months. If only things could stay like this, simple, uncomplicated by the reality growing inside her. As if sensing her thoughts, the baby chose that moment to deliver a particularly strong kick. Penelope gasped, her hand flying to her belly. "Penny? You okay?" Peter asked, alarmed. Cooper's eyes narrowed, his gaze dropping to where her hand rested. For a moment no one spoke, the only sound the rain beating against the roof and the occasional rumble of thunder. "Peter," Cooper said finally, his voice carefully neutral, Why don't you check if that leak by the back door has gotten any worse? The boy looked between them, sensing the tension, but nodded and moved away. When he was out of earshot, Cooper leaned forward. How long? He asked quietly. Penelope's eyes filled with tears. Almost 6 months. Cooper nodded slowly. The father? Gone, she whispered. He left when I told him. Another nod. And what are your plans? The direct question, asked without judgment, broke through her composure. I'm leaving after the school term ends. Going to stay with my cousin in California until after. Then I don't know. Find work somewhere? No one knows me, I suppose. Cooper was silent for a long moment, his weathered face unreadable in the lamplight. Finally, he asked, Is that what you want? To leave? What I want doesn't matter, Penelope said, a bitter edge to her voice. This town won't have an unmarried schoolteacher with a baby. Maybe, Cooper agreed. But I asked what you want, not what the town wants. The question startled her. What did she want? She'd been so consumed with shame and practical considerations that she hadn't allowed herself to think beyond survival. I want... Her voice faltered. I want to not be ashamed. I want my child to have a good life. I want to not be alone. Cooper's hand moved across the desk to cover hers. You're not alone, Penelope. Before she could respond, Peter called from the back door. Uncle Coop, I think the rain's letting up. The moment broken, Cooper stood, his hand lingering on hers for just a second longer. We should head out while we can. Storm might pick up again. The ride back to town was quiet, with Peter chattering between them about the storm and the card games. Cooper insisted on seeing Penelope safely to the schoolhouse door, helping her down from the wagon with gentle hands. Thank you, she said, not just for the ride, but for everything unsaid between them. Get some rest, he replied, his eyes conveying more than his words. We'll talk soon. That night, lying in her narrow bed listening to the rain, Penelope allowed herself to imagine a different future, one where she didn't have to leave Willow Creek, where her child grew up in the fresh mountain air, where Cooper Yates's steady presence was a constant in their lives. It was a dangerous dream, one that could only lead to heartbreak, but for that one night, she let herself have it. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having washed everything clean. Penelope was sweeping mud from the schoolhouse steps when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Looking up, she saw Cooper riding toward her, alone this time, determination written in every line of his body. He dismounted in one fluid motion, securing his horse to the hitching post before climbing the steps to stand before her. He'd shaved, she noticed, and wore a clean shirt under his leather vest. Morning, Penelope, he said, removing his hat. Hope I'm not disturbing you. Not at all, she replied, setting the broom aside. Is Peter all right? He's fine. Left him helping with the calves. Cooper shifted, uncharacteristically nervous. I was hoping we might talk. Penelope led him inside, her heart pounding. Had he come to say goodbye? To gently explain that while he respected her, their friendship had to end now that he knew her secret? Once inside, Cooper didn't sit. Instead, he paced the length of the classroom before turning to face her. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, he began, about leaving Willow Creek. Penelope nodded, bracing herself. I'd like to propose an alternative, Cooper continued, his voice steady despite the flush creeping up his neck. Marry me. Penelope stared at him, certain she'd misheard. What? Marry me, he repeated, more firmly this time. Stay in Willow Creek. Let me give your child a name, a home. Cooper. Penelope shook her head, disbelieving. You can't be serious. This isn't your responsibility. I'm not talking about responsibility, he said, taking a step closer. I'm talking about choice, my choice, to offer you and your child a life here, with me and Peter at the ranch. Why would you do this? Penelope whispered, tears threatening. Cooper's expression softened. Because in the weeks I've known you, I've seen your kindness, your strength. I've watched how you care for the children in your class, how you've helped Peter come out of his shell. He took another step toward her. And because the thought of you leaving makes me realize I don't want to lose you. But the baby will be mine in every way that matters, Cooper finished. I lost my own ma when I was young. Never knew my pa. Family isn't just about blood, Penelope. It's about who chooses to stay, who chooses to love. Tears spilled down Penelope's cheeks. The town will talk. They'll count the months. Cooper shrugged. Let them talk. We'll say we were married quietly before I came to Willow Creek. That the baby came early. Or we'll tell the truth and dare anyone to say a word against my wife. His voice took on a fierce edge at the last word. Your wife, Penelope repeated, testing the word. If you'll have me, Cooper said, taking her hands in his. I'm not offering out of pity, Penelope. I'm offering because I believe we could build something good together. For us, for Peter, for your baby. Our baby, she corrected softly. Hope flared in Cooper's eyes. Is that a yes? Instead of answering, Penelope raised herself on tiptoe and pressed her lips to his. It was a gentle kiss, tentative and sweet. But it sealed a promise between them. When they parted, Cooper's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. I take it that's a yes, then? Penelope nodded, laughing through her tears. Yes, Cooper Yates, I'll marry you. They were married 2 days later by Reverend Miller in the small church on the edge of town. Peter stood as Cooper's best man, proudly holding the rings on a small cushion. Mrs. Fletcher, whose initial disapproval had softened at the news of their earlier marriage, arranged a bouquet of wildflowers for Penelope to carry. The whispers still followed them, calculations of dates, speculation about the hasty ceremony, but with Cooper's steady presence beside her and his ring on her finger, Penelope found they didn't sting as much as before. That evening, Cooper drove them to the ranch in his wagon, Peter riding ahead on his pony, eager to show Penelope their home. As they crested the last hill, the Yates Ranch spread before them, a sturdy 2-story house surrounded by corrals, barns, and beyond, acres of grazing land where cattle dotted the landscape like mobile shadows. It's beautiful, Penelope breathed. Cooper's hand covered hers. Welcome home, Mrs. Beacom Yates. The first weeks of marriage passed in a flurry of adjustments. Penelope finished the school term, riding to and from town with Cooper or one of the ranch hands each day. In the evenings, she threw herself into making the ranch house a home, rearranging furniture that had remained unchanged since Cooper's uncle had lived there, hanging curtains and planting a small kitchen garden. Cooper was unfailingly gentle with her, patient as they found their way together as husband and wife. Their first nights together were awkward, neither quite knowing how to navigate the intimacy of marriage with the physical evidence of another man's presence between them. But Cooper never made her feel ashamed of her growing belly. Instead, he seemed to marvel at it, sometimes placing a calloused hand against her skin to feel the baby move. July turned to August, the heat settling over the land like a wool blanket. Penelope's time grew closer, her body heavy and ungainly. Cooper insisted she stop teaching, hiring a young woman from town to finish the term in her place. You need to rest, he told her firmly when she protested. The school will still be there after the baby comes, if that's what you want. One night, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, Penelope voiced the fear that had been growing in her heart. What if you can't love it? She asked quietly. The baby. What if when you see it, all you can think of is him? Cooper was silent for a long moment, rocking gently in the chair beside hers. Finally, he said, My Uncle Henry wasn't really my uncle. Penelope turned to look at him, surprised by the non sequitur. My ma worked for him when I was a boy, Cooper continued. She was his housekeeper. When she died of the fever, I was 10 years old. Had no other family. Uncle Henry could have sent me to an orphanage or put me to work as a stable boy somewhere. Instead, he raised me as his own, taught me everything I know about ranching, about being a man. He paused, his eyes on the distant mountains. When he died, he left me everything. His name, this ranch, his legacy. He reached over, taking Penelope's hand. That man taught me that family is who you choose, not just who you're born to. So when I look at your baby, our baby, I won't be seeing anyone but our child. Tears welled in Penelope's eyes. I don't deserve you, Cooper Yates. Now that's where you're wrong, Cooper said, bringing her hand to his lips. You deserve everything good in this world, Penelope, and I aim to spend the rest of my life trying to give it to you. The baby came 2 weeks early, on a sweltering September night. Cooper rode for the doctor himself, leaving Peter with instructions to stay with Penelope while Mrs. Rodriguez, the cook, boiled water and prepared the bedroom. The labor was long and difficult. By the time Dr. Harrison arrived, Penelope was delirious with pain, calling out for her mother. Cooper refused to leave her side, holding her hand through each contraction, wiping her brow with a cool cloth, whispering encouragement when her strength seemed to fail. You can do this, Penny, he murmured, using Peter's nickname for her. You're the strongest woman I know. Just hold on to me. In the gray light of dawn, their daughter was born small but healthy, with a shock of dark hair and lungs that announced her arrival to the entire household. She's perfect, Cooper whispered, tears streaming unashamedly down his face as the doctor placed the swaddled infant in Penelope's arms. She needs a name, Penelope said, her voice hoarse from hours of labor. Cooper reached out, his finger tracing the tiny, perfect features of his daughter's face. What about Hope? Because that's what she is. Our hope for the future. Hope Elizabeth Yates, Penelope agreed, after my mother. As the doctor and Mrs. Rodriguez left to give the new family some privacy, Cooper settled onto the bed beside Penelope, his arm around her shoulders, gazing down at the miracle they now shared. Thank you, Penelope whispered, leaning against his solid strength. For what? Cooper asked, brushing a kiss against her temple. For making me feel lovable again. For seeing this. She glanced down at their daughter. Not as a burden or a shame, but as a blessing. Cooper's arm tightened around her. The day you told me about the baby, I saw the fear in your eyes, the shame. But all I could think was how brave you were, choosing to bring this life into the world despite everything stacked against you. He touched Hope's tiny fist, which closed reflexively around his finger. This child is the greatest proof of love I've ever seen. Not because of how she came to be, but because of what you were willing to sacrifice for her. Penelope looked up at him, seeing the truth in his eyes. I love you, Cooper Yates, not just for what you've done for us, but for who you are. And I love you, Penelope Yates. You and Hope and Peter, you're my family now, forever. As the sun rose higher in the sky, Peter was finally allowed in to meet his new sister. The boy approached the bed cautiously, his eyes wide with wonder as he peered at the tiny bundle in Penelope's arms. She's so small, he whispered. Do you want to hold her? Penelope asked. Peter nodded solemnly, sitting carefully in the chair Cooper pulled up beside the bed. As Cooper placed Hope in the boy's arms, showing him how to support her head, Penelope watched the tableau before her, her husband, her stepson, her daughter, and felt a peace she had never known before. The months that followed were a blur of midnight feedings, diaper changes, and the 1,000 daily miracles of watching a new life unfold. Hope grew stronger each day, her personality emerging stubborn like her mother, Cooper claimed, with a laugh that could light up the darkest room. Peter appointed himself Hope's official protector, proudly showing her off to the ranch hands and reading to her from his school books, even though she was far too young to understand. Cooper proved to be a natural father, as patient with Hope's colicky nights as he was with Peter's occasional moodiness. He took to carrying Hope in a sling against his chest as he went about his ranch work, her dark head bobbing contentedly as he checked fences and counted cattle. The town's attitude toward them gradually shifted. Mrs. Fletcher was the first to visit after Hope's birth, bringing a hand-knitted blanket and cooing over the baby as if the circumstances of her arrival had never been in question. Others followed, curiosity about the newest Yates eventually overcoming any lingering scandal. By the time Hope was 6 months old, Penelope felt secure enough in her new life to consider returning to teaching. The school board, influenced by Cooper's position as one of the largest landowners in the area, agreed to let her resume her position, with the understanding that Hope would accompany her to the schoolhouse each day. "Are you sure about this?" Cooper asked as he helped her into the wagon on her first day back. "You don't have to go back if you're not ready." Penelope smiled, adjusting Hope in her arms. "I'm sure. I miss teaching, and I want our daughter to see that women can be mothers and still have work they're passionate about." Cooper kissed her, a lingering touch that still had the power to make her heart race after nearly a year of marriage. "You are remarkable, Penelope Yates." That spring, as wildflowers bloomed across the ranch's meadows and Hope took her first tottering steps, Cooper came to Penelope with news. "I've been thinking about expanding," he said, as they sat on the porch swing after putting the children to bed. "Buying the old Jensen property that borders ours to the north, it would double our grazing land, give us access to that spring-fed creek." "Can we afford it?" Penelope asked, practical as always. Cooper nodded. "The cattle drive last fall brought in more than expected, and I've been setting aside money since Uncle Henry died. It's a good investment in our future, in the children's future." Penelope leaned against him, watching the fireflies begin to emerge in the gathering dusk. "Our family's growing in more ways than one," she said softly. Cooper stilled beside her. "Penny? Are you saying—" She smiled up at him, taking his hand and placing it over her still flat stomach. "Hope's going to be a big sister. Around Christmas, Dr. Harrison thinks." The joy that spread across Cooper's face was everything Penelope had hoped for. He lifted her from the swing, spinning her around as she laughed and protested. "Careful, the baby." Cooper set her gently on her feet, his hands framing her face. "Another baby," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Our baby." Penelope's heart swelled at the emphasis he placed on "our." From the beginning, Cooper had claimed Hope as his own, but there was an undeniable sweetness in knowing that this child would be created from their love, a physical manifestation of the family they had built together. "Are you happy?" she asked. Cooper's answer was a kiss that left no doubt. Their son, Samuel Cooper Yates, was born on a snowy December night, a healthy, robust boy with his father's storm-gray eyes and his mother's determined chin. Peter, now 12, pronounced himself satisfied with a brother after having to endure Hope's dolls and tea parties, while Hope, at 18 months, regarded the new arrival with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. As Penelope watched Cooper hold their son for the first time, she thought back to that moment in the schoolhouse when he had asked her to marry him. How afraid she had been then, certain that her pregnancy had made her unworthy of love, destined for a life of whispers and judgment. Instead, she had found a man who saw her pregnancy not as a mark of shame, but as a testament to her courage and love. A man who had given her child his name, his protection, his heart. A man who had shown her that family was not defined by blood or convention, but by choice and commitment. "What are you thinking about, Mrs. Yates?" Cooper asked, coming to sit beside her on the bed, their newborn son cradled in his arms. About how lucky we are, Penelope replied, leaning her head against his shoulder. About how different things might have been if you hadn't come to Willow Creek when you did. Cooper shifted Sam to one arm so he could wrap the other around Penelope. I don't believe in luck, he said. I believe in providence. In things happening the way they're meant to. Even the hard things? Penelope asked, thinking of Charles's abandonment, the months of fear and shame. Even those, Cooper confirmed. Because without them, we might not have found each other. And I can't imagine my life without you in it, Penny. You, Peter, Hope, and now Sam, you're my whole world. Penelope closed her eyes, letting his words wash over her like a benediction. From the lowest point in her life, abandoned, pregnant, and afraid, she had found her way to this moment of perfect contentment. As the snow fell softly outside, blanketing the ranch in pristine white, the Yates family slept peacefully, wrapped in the warmth of their home and the love they had built together, a love that had seen past circumstance and convention to the truth of what mattered most. 5 years later, the Yates Ranch had grown to become one of the most prosperous in the county. Cooper's careful management and Penelope's sharp business sense had allowed them to weather the drought of '83 and the harsh winter of '84 that had bankrupted lesser operations. Peter, now 17, had grown into a thoughtful young man with his uncle's talent for handling horses. He was Cooper's right hand on the ranch, though he spoke increasingly of attending college in Denver when he turned 18, a dream Cooper and Penelope fully supported. Hope, at 6, was the image of her mother, with the same chestnut hair and determined spirit. Already reading well above her grade level, she delighted in helping Penelope at the schoolhouse 3 days a week, gravely assisting the younger children with their letters. Sam, their sturdy 5-year-old, was Cooper's shadow, following him around the ranch from dawn to dusk, solemnly absorbing every lesson about cattle and horses, weather and land. And the youngest, 3-year-old Lily, born after a difficult pregnancy that Dr. Harrison had advised against, was the family's sunshine, golden-haired and laughing, equally adored by her parents and siblings. On the afternoon of Hope's 6th birthday, the entire family gathered in the meadow behind the house for a picnic. Cooper had built a swing from an old oak tree, and the children took turns pushing each other, their laughter carrying on the summer breeze. Penelope leaned against Cooper as they sat on a quilt, watching their family. "Did you ever imagine this?" she asked, "when you rode into Willow Creek that day?" Cooper smiled, his arm tightening around her waist. "Not in my wildest dreams. I thought maybe I'd find a place to settle, raise some cattle, give Peter a decent home." He looked at her, the love in his eyes undimmed by the passing years. "I never imagined I'd find everything I never knew I wanted." Penelope kissed him, still marveling that this good, steady man had chosen her, had seen possibility where others saw only shame, had built a life with her that exceeded anything she could have hoped for. "Mama, Papa, look!" Hope called, pumping her legs on the swing, going higher than ever before. "I'm flying!" Cooper and Penelope waved, their hands finding each other in the space between them, fingers intertwining as naturally as their lives had. "You know," Cooper said, his voice thoughtful, "I've been thinking about what you said last month, about the schoolhouse being too small for all the new families moving to the area." Penelope nodded. The town had grown considerably in recent years, with the railroad's arrival bringing new settlers and opportunities. "What if we donated some of the land by the creek for a proper school building?" Cooper suggested. 2 or 3 rooms, maybe quarters for another teacher? The town board's been looking for a suitable location. Penelope turned to him, surprised. "That's prime land, Cooper." "Are you sure?" He shrugged. "What better investment than in the future of the town our children will grow up in? Besides, I thought maybe you might want to be the headmistress of a proper school, instead of teaching in that one-room building. Warmth spread through Penelope's chest at his thoughtfulness, his constant support of her ambitions alongside their family life. I love you, Cooper Yates. And I love you, Penelope Yates. Always have, always will. As the sun began its descent toward the distant mountains, casting long shadows across the meadow, Cooper called the children for cake. They came running, Peter carrying Lily on his shoulders, Hope and Sam racing ahead, their faces flushed with excitement. Gathered around the blanket, the family sang Happy Birthday to Hope, who beamed with pride as she blew out her 6 candles. As Penelope cut the cake, she caught Cooper watching her, his eyes soft with the same tender expression she'd first seen when he'd held Hope moments after her birth. Later, as they walked hand in hand back to the house, the children running ahead, Cooper said quietly, "You know what I was thinking just now? How that baby you were carrying when we met the one you thought made you unlovable was the greatest gift I've ever received." Penelope stopped, turning to face him in the golden light of sunset. How so? Cooper brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch as reverent as it had been on their wedding day. Because Hope led me to you, and you, Penelope Yates, taught me the true meaning of family, of love. As you taught me, she whispered, standing on tiptoe to kiss him, the man who had seen her at her most vulnerable and found not weakness, but strength, not shame, but the greatest proof of love imaginable. Around them, their children's laughter rang out across the land they had cultivated together, not just the acres of the Yates Ranch, but the fertile ground of their shared life, where love had taken root and flourished against all odds. And as the first star appeared in the darkening sky, Penelope made a silent wish, not for anything she lacked, but in gratitude for everything she had found in the arms of a cowboy who had rewritten her story from one of abandonment to one of belonging, from shame to pride, from fear to the deepest, most abiding love.